Principal of your city school, Ms. Kavita Vajpayee, to this auditorium. Audience, can you please have an round of applause? Before we continue, we have a short introductory video to TED, which we will play now.
Kenya to Colombia, Iraq to Korea, slums, schools, in prisons and in theatres. Every day, people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons and in theatres. Every day, people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a non-profit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication and time that made it all possible. It's they who control the speakers, and the views you will hear today are of course those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. We hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. It is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you take out. And now, on with the show.
As per TEDx rules, we will now be playing a short TED talk.
The human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or say, I love you. And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world? Well, I'd like to suggest there are a number of habits that we need to move away from. I've assembled for your pleasure here 7 deadly sins of speaking. I'm not pretending this is an exhaustive list, but these 7, I think, are pretty large. Habits that we can all fall into. First, gossip. Speaking ill of somebody who's not present. Not a nice habit, and we know perfectly well the person gossiping 5 minutes later will be gossiping about us. Second, judging. We know people who are like this in conversation, and it's very hard to listen to somebody if you know that you're being judged and found wanting at the same time. Third, negativity. You can fall into this. My mother in the last years of her life became very, very negative, and it's hard to listen. I remember one day I said to her, it's October the 1st today, and she said, I know, it's a bit dreadful. It's hard to listen when somebody's that negative. And another form of negativity, complaining. Well, this is the national art of the UK. It's our national sport. We complain about the weather, about sport, about politics, about everything. But actually complaining is vile misery. It's not spreading sunshine and lightness in the world. Excuses. We've all met this guy. Maybe we've all been this guy. Some people have a blame thrower. They just pass it on to everybody else and don't take responsibility for their actions. And again, hard to listen to somebody who's being like that. Penultimate, the 6th of the 7, embroidery, exaggeration. It demeans our language actually sometimes. For example, if I see something that really is awesome, what do I call it? And then, of course, this exaggeration becomes lying, out and out lying, and we don't want to listen to people we know are lying to us. And finally, dogmatism. The confusion of facts with opinions. When those two things get conflated, you're listening into the wind. You know, somebody is bombarding you with their opinions as if they were true. It's difficult to listen to that. So here they are, 7 deadly sins of speaking. These are things I think we need to avoid. But is there a positive way to think about this? Yes, there is. I'd like to suggest that there are 4 really powerful cornerstones, foundations, that we can stand on if we want our speech to be powerful and to make change in the world. Fortunately, these things spell a word. The word is hail, and it has a great definition as well. I'm not talking about the stuff that falls from the sky and hits you on the head. I'm talking about this definition, to greet or acclaim enthusiastically, which is, I think, how our words will be received if we stand on these 4 things. So what do they stand for? See if you can guess. The H, honesty, of course. Being true in what you say, being straight and clear. The A is authenticity, just being yourself. A friend of mine described it as standing in your own truth, which I think is a lovely way to put it. The I is integrity, being your word, actually doing what you say, and being somebody people can trust. And the L is love. I don't mean romantic love, but I do mean wishing people well. For 2 reasons. First of all, I think absolute honesty may not be what we want. I mean, my goodness, you look ugly this morning. Perhaps that's not necessary. Tempered with love, of course, honesty is a great thing. But also, if you're really wishing somebody well, it's very hard to judge them at the same time. I'm not even sure you can do those 2 things simultaneously. So hail. Also, now that's what you say, and it's like the old song, it is what you say, it's also the way that you say it. You have an amazing toolbox. This instrument is incredible, and yet this is a toolbox that very few people have ever opened. I'd like to have a little rummage in there with you now, and just pull a few tools out that you might like to take away and play with, which will increase the power of your speaking. Register, for example. Now, falsetto register may not be very useful most of the time, but there's a register in between. I'm not going to get very technical about this for any of you who are voice coaches. You can locate your voice, however. So if I talk up here in my nose, you can hear the difference. If I go down here in my throat, which is where most of us speak from most of the time, but if you want weight, you need to go down here to the chest. You hear the difference? We vote for politicians with lower voices. It's true. Because we associate depth with power and with authority. That's register. And we have timbre. It's the way your voice feels. Again, the research shows that we prefer voices which are rich, smooth, warm, like hot chocolate. Well, if that's not you, that's not the end of the world, because you can train. Go get a voice coach. And there are amazing things you can do with breathing, with posture, and with exercises to improve the timbre of your voice. Then prosody. I love prosody. This is the sing-song, the meta-language that we use in order to impart meaning. It's route 1 for meaning in conversation. People who speak all on one note are really quite hard to listen to if they don't have any prosody at all. That's where the word monotonic comes from, or monotonous, monotone. Also, we have repetitive prosody now coming in, where every sentence ends as if it were a question, when it's actually not a question, it's a statement. And if you repeat that one over and over, it's actually restricting your ability to communicate through prosody, which I think is a shame. So let's try and break that habit. Pace. I can get very, very excited by saying something really, really quickly, or I can slow right down to emphasize. And at the end of that, of course, is our old friend, silence. There's nothing wrong with a bit of silence in a talk, is there? We don't have to fill it with ums and ahs. Can be very powerful. Of course, pitch often goes along with pace to indicate arousal. Well, you can do it just with pitch. Where did you leave my keys? Where did you leave my keys? It's a slightly different meaning in those 2 deliveries. And finally, volume. I can get really excited by using volume, sorry about that if I startled anybody, or I can have you really pay attention by getting very quiet. Some people broadcast the whole time, try not to do that. That's called softcasting. Imposing your sound on people around you carelessly and inconsiderately. Not nice. Of course, where this all comes into play, most of all, is when you've got something really important to do. It might be standing on a stage like this and giving a talk to people. It might be proposing marriage, asking for a raise, a wedding speech, whatever it is. If it's really important, you owe it to yourself to look at this toolbox and the engine that it's going to work on. And no engine works well without being warmed up. Warm up your voice. Actually, let me show you how to do that. Would you all like to stand up for a moment? I'm going to show you the 6 vocal warm-up exercises that I do before every talk I ever do. Anytime you're going to talk to anybody important, do these. First, arms up. Deep breath in and sigh out. Like that. One more time. Very good. Now we're going to warm up our lips and we're going to go bop, 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 bop. Very good. And now, just like when you were a kid. Now your lips should be coming alive. We're going to do the tongue next with exaggerated la, 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 la. Beautiful. You're getting really good at this. And then roll an R. That's like champagne for the tongue. Finally, and if I can only do one, the pros call this the siren. It's really good. It starts with a wee and goes to all. The wee is high, the all is low. So you go wee. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Take a seat. Thank you. Next time you speak, do those in advance. Now, let me just put this in context to close. This is a serious point here. This is where we are now, right? We speak not very well into people who simply aren't listening in an environment that's all about noise and bad acoustics. I have talked about that on this stage in different phases. What would the world be like if we were speaking powerfully to people who are listening consciously in environments which were actually fit for purpose? Or to make that a bit larger, what would the world be like if we were creating sound consciously and consuming sound consciously and designing all our environments consciously for sound? That would be a world that does sound beautiful and one where understanding would be the norm. And that is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
Our next speaker for the day is our very own IBDP student, Shlok. An intensely community-oriented, intelligent and yet dedicated IB student, Shlok is currently working on a more effective statistical tool to help diagnose incidences of thalassemia, a deadly disease which has ruined the lives of many. I now call upon the IBDP Council to felicitate Shlok with a bouquet and a token of our appreciation. Safely say a moment we've all been waiting for. Shlok, Paul, you have the stage.
Okay, so before I begin, I'd just like to apologize to Mr. Harvey for sneaking into the during lunch break and hitching onto his presentation. And I'd like to apologize to everyone for not having a formal presentation of my own. This is what working in an extended essay with Lakshmi must test you. Thank you. Okay. So my mother lost a lot of blood when I was born. The doctors, they almost gave up on her. But my mother survived. As I grew up, I never realized that issues related to blood would become so deep and so integral a part of my life. Until one day, I met an amazing man called Vinay Shetty. Something in his story and his mission connected me to my story and my mother's near-fatal loss of blood. Thus, was born my newfound interest in thalassemia. So what is thalassemia? Well, thalassemia is a genetic blood disorder which affects red blood cells. Simply put, the individual lacks the ability to produce normal hemoglobin. As a result, the oxygen that the individual breathes in does not get delivered to the different cells, tissues, and organs of the body. This obviously will have fatal consequences. So there's a need for regular blood transfusions. In other words, the individual is dependent on someone else's hemoglobin for survival. Unless well transfused, the individual will be sick, with brittle bones, enlarged spleens, stunted growth, and a life full of transfusions, injections, medicines, and medical investigations. The end of childhood, practically a life in prison. In India, nearly 12,000 infants are born every year with thalassemia. That's one every hour. Yet, little is known about this rare blood disorder. So 7 months ago, I took up the challenge to understand this issue. I visited patients who suffered from the disease and attended blood camps to volunteer my services to an organization called Think, which was led by the amazing Vinay Shetty. One thing led to another, and I began to take a keen interest in the screening procedure for thalassemia. I began to question the current procedure. Essentially, to detect thalassemia, one must perform what is called a high-performance liquid chromatography test. But this test is expensive and not cost-effective when it comes to addressing populations of 1.2 billion people. Many of us here are thalassemia minor, but we don't know it yet. And if one considers the fact that an estimated 50 million Indians are thalassemia minor, it's very clear that every Indian must undergo a screening test. An individual has the disorder from birth only if both his parents are thalassemia minor. When two thalassemia minor individuals marry, there's a greater chance, a 1/4 chance, that the child could be thalassemia major. So how do we create better screening tests that are cheaper and available to everyone? That was the big challenge. So here was an opportunity for me to make a difference in my community. This man called Vinay supplied me with over 2,000 lab reports, and I spent the last 7 months analyzing trends in their blood data. These were reports of samples that were subjugated to both the expensive high-performance liquid chromatography test and the relatively inexpensive complete blood count test. So since we had values of both tests, we could create a correlation. We used values from the complete blood count test, a relatively inexpensive test, to determine the percentage chance that an individual had thalassemia. By correlating values that increase when an individual is thalassemia, it became easier to understand which variables correlate to that relating to thalassemia. So through the course of my work, we narrowed down on 4 mathematical indices from the complete blood count test for the use of more effective screening. And thus began the TAL project, a project that hopes to bring the cost down for individuals of the high-performance liquid chromatography test from 800 to 300 rupees and as low as 55 rupees per individual for NGOs. So the TAL project essentially starts with an informative and simple website. An individual can learn about the different indices present to screen for thalassemia and weigh the pros and cons of each. He or she can then decide which index to use to test for the probability of having thalassemia by simply inputting the values available from his or her complete blood count test. Using standard deviation and mean values, which is practically simple math, to predict probabilities, the website constantly evolves as more data pours in and more accuracy can be obtained on part of the mathematical indices. However, apart from this project, my work isn't done. So to further the TAL project, I hope to utilize the potential of crowdsourcing. So similar to an application called Foldit, which was developed in the University of Washington, and that's something that all of you should definitely check out. I plan to create an application that teaches individuals basic statistics and allows them to play with these blood data numbers, invent their own indices, and test their hard work against hard work done in the past. So that's my story so far, and that's the idea that I want to spread. As I said in the start, my mother lost a lot of blood and almost lost her life when I was born. I want her to know that the blood that she lost giving birth to me can be found in the blood that I hope to save through my research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lok. Again, pursuant to TEDx rules, we must show the audience another TED Talk, which we shall do now.
I was afraid of womanhood. Not that I'm not afraid now, but I've learned to pretend. I've learned to be flexible. In fact, I've developed some interesting tools to help me deal with this fear. Let me explain. Back in the 50s and 60s, when I was growing up, little girls were supposed to be kind and thoughtful and pretty and gentle and soft. And we were supposed to fit into roles that were sort of shadowy, really not quite clear what we were supposed to be. There were plenty of role models all around us. We had our mothers, our aunts, our cousins, our sisters, and of course the ever-present media bombarding us with images and words telling us how to be. Now, my mother was different. She was a homemaker, but she and I didn't go out and do girly things together, and she didn't buy me pink outfits. Instead, she knew what I needed, and she bought me a book of cartoons. And I just ate it up. I drew, and since I knew that humor was acceptable in my family, I could draw, do what I wanted to do, and not have to perform, not have to speak. I was very shy, and I could still get approval. I was launched as a cartoonist. Now, when we're young, we don't always know. We know there are rules out there, but we don't always know, we don't perform them right. Even though we are imprinted at birth with these things, and we're told what the most important color in the world is. We're told what shape we're supposed to be in. We're told what to wear and how to do our hair. And how to behave. Now, the rules that I'm talking about are constantly being monitored by the culture. We're being corrected, and the primary policemen are women, because we are the carriers of the tradition. We pass it down from generation to generation. Not only that, we always have this vague notion that something's expected of us. And on top of all of these rules, they keep changing. We don't know what's going on half the time, so it puts us in a very tenuous position. Now, if you don't like these rules, and many of us don't, I know I didn't, and I still don't, even though I follow them half the time, not quite aware that I'm following them, what better way than to change them with humor? Humor relies on the traditions of society. It takes what we know and it twists it. It takes the codes of behavior and the codes of dress, and it makes it unexpected, and that's what elicits a laugh. Now, what if you put together women and humor? I think you can get change. Because women are on the ground floor, and we know the tradition so well, we can bring a different voice to the table. Now, I started drawing in the middle of a lot of chaos. I grew up not far from here in Washington, D.C. during the civil rights movement, the assassinations, the Watergate hearings, and then the feminist movement. And I think I was drawing, trying to figure out what was going on. And then also my family was in chaos. And I drew to try to bring my family together. Tried to bring my family together with laughter. It didn't work. My parents got divorced and my sister was arrested. But I found my place. I found that I didn't have to wear high heels. I didn't have to wear pink. And I could feel like I fit in. Now, when I was a little older in my 20s, I realized that there are not many women in cartooning. And I thought, well, maybe I can break the little glass ceiling of cartooning. And so I did. I became a cartoonist. And then I thought, in my 40s, I started thinking, well, why don't I do something? I always loved political cartoons, so why don't I do something with the content of my cartoons to make people think about the stupid rules that we're following, as well as laugh. Now, my perspective is a particularly American perspective. I can't help it. I live here, even though I've traveled a lot, I still think like an American woman. But I believe that the rules that I'm talking about are universal, of course, that each culture has its different codes of behavior and dress and traditions, and each woman has to deal with these same things we do here in the U.S. Consequently, we have women because we're on the ground, we know the tradition, we have amazing antennae. Now, my work lately has been to collaborate with international cartoonists, which I so enjoy, and it's given me a greater appreciation for the power of cartoons to get at the truth, to get at the issues quickly and succinctly. And not only that, you get to the viewer through not only the intellect, but through the heart. My work also has allowed me to collaborate with women cartoonists from across the world, countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Argentina, France, and we have sat together and laughed and talked and shared our difficulties. And these women are working so hard to get their voices heard in some very difficult circumstances. But I feel blessed to be able to work with them. And we talk about how women have such strong perceptions because of our tenuous position and our role as tradition keepers, that we can have the great potential to be change agents. And I truly believe that we can change this thing one laugh at a time. Thank you.
Our last speaker for the day is Mr. Jamil Shah. A poster boy for entrepreneurial success through dedication and hard work. He has come from his humble beginnings in the village of Dogra to owning Shah Shoes, a name in the shoe industry that provides dancing shoes to the A-listers of Bollywood. I now call upon once again members of the Student Council to present Mr. Jamil Shah with a floral bouquet and a token of our appreciation. I now welcome to the stage our last speaker for the day, Mr. Jamil Shah.
गुड आफ्टरनून। मेरा नाम जमील शाह है और मैं दरभंगा के छोटा सा गाँव डोगरा से हूँ। और जिस तरह से आज के बच्चे सपने देखते हैं उस तरह से हमने भी देखे थे। पढ़ने की चाहत थी और हमारे फादर के पास इतने पैसे नहीं थे कि वो हमें अच्छी एजुकेशन दे सके। हो सकता है उन्होंने सोचा हो कि मैं अच्छा पढ़ा सकूं, बट एनीवे घर का बड़ा होने के कारण मेरी एक जिम्मेदारी बनती थी कि मैं कुछ लोगों की तरह मैं भी कुछ अच्छा करूं। और मेरे गांव के कई लोग दिल्ली जाते हैं, कलकत्ता जाते हैं, बॉम्बे जाते हैं पैसा कमाने के लिए। तो मैंने भी सोचा कि मैं भी क्यों नहीं एक सिटीज में जाता हूँ, अच्छी जगह जहाँ पे मैं कुछ अच्छा कर सकूँ। मैं एक्चुअली 4 भाई और 4 बहन हैं, तो बड़ी फैमिली है, तो संभालना भी जरूरी है। तो मैं पहली बार दिल्ली गया और दिल्ली जाने के बाद मैंने सोचा कि मैं कुछ काम करूँ। मेरा एक भाई था जो वहाँ पे, एक रिश्तेदार भाई था जो लेके गया वहाँ पे, और मैं वहाँ पे एक छोटी सी फैक्ट्री थी, वॉलेट और बैग्स जो लेडीज लोग यूज़ करती है उसका। मैं वहाँ पे 1 साल काम किया। उसके बाद जैसे दोस्त होते हैं ना, संडे की छुट्टी होती है, सब लोग घूमने जाते हैं, कोई गार्डन जाता है, कोई कहीं जाता है। तो मैंने एक दोस्त को बोला कि चलो हम लोग मूवी देखने जाते हैं। और जब मैं मूवी देख रहा था तो मुझे रियलाइज हुआ कि ये जो बड़े बड़े बॉलीवुड एक्ट्रेस हैं और एक्ट्रेस है वो कहाँ रहते हैं। तो मेरे दोस्तों ने बोला क्योंकि मैं दिल्ली में एक्चुअली 1 साल रह चुका था और मैंने कभी किसी को नहीं देखा, तो मैंने सोचा कि पता करते कहाँ रहते हैं उन लोग। तो कुछ लोगों ने बताया कि लोग बॉम्बे में रहते हैं। तो मेरा माइंड वहाँ से डिफरेंट हो गया कि मुझे किसी भी तरह बॉलीवुड के स्टार लोगों से मिलने। एक बिहार से जो लोग आते हैं उनकी चाहत होती है कि मुझे बॉलीवुड में जाना है। आजकल ऐसा चल रहा है कि मुझे एक्टर बनना है, हीरो बनना है, कुछ बनना है, बट मेरी ये चाहत नहीं थी। मेरी चाहत थी मुझे मिलना है किसी भी तरह। फिर मैं वापस गांव गया। गांव जाने के बाद मैं वापस बॉम्बे आया। बॉम्बे में पहली बार मैं कल्याण में आया था, जहाँ पे मेरे फादर एक पावर लूम की फैक्ट्री थी, वहाँ पे काम करते थे। बट इतना छोटा होने के कारण मैं वो काम नहीं कर सका, क्योंकि 12 घंटे लोग खड़े रह के काम करते हैं वहाँ पे। फिर मैंने सोचा कि नहीं, मुझे बॉम्बे जाना है, बॉम्बे जाना है। पहली बार मैं धारावी में इंटर किया और मुझे लगा कि इससे अच्छा तो मेरा गांव है, क्योंकि धारावी में जिस तरह से लोग मारते थे एक दूसरे को, एक दूसरे के साथ तकलीफें देते थे। फिर मैंने सोचा चलो अब जिंदगी गुजारनी है कैसे भी करके, और जो कोशिश है उसको पीछे नहीं छोड़नी चाहिए। धारावी में मैंने कुछ दिन काम किए। काम करते करते मैंने सोचा कि थोड़ी बड़ी फैक्ट्री हो, थोड़ी बड़ी फैक्ट्री हो, थोड़ी अच्छी जगह कंपनी में काम करो। ऐसे ही करते करते मैंने एक छोटा थोड़ा अच्छा कंपनी में काम किया। काम करने के बाद जैसे दोस्त लोग काम करते हैं, कुछ पैसे शेयर करते लोगों के साथ, मैंने भी उस तरह से शेयर किया। और मैंने इस तरह से मैंने सेव किया था कि मैं कुछ करना चाहता हूँ, और उस पैसे को लेकर के कोई भाग जाता है तो कितनी तकलीफें होती है। फिर मैंने पता किया कि वो कहाँ गया है, कैसे भी करके मुझे पता लगा, पता चला कि वो बेंगलोर में है। मैं बेंगलोर में पहली बार गया। बॉम्बे में रहने वाला आदमी थोड़ा सा स्टाइल आ गया था मुझ में। और मैं जब बेंगलोर गया तो एक अच्छा होटल में था मैं, और वहाँ पर जब मैं रह रहा था उसको ढूंढने की कोशिश की, नहीं मिला मुझे। फिर उनके भाई को मैंने फ़ोन किया कि भाई आपका भाई तो मिल नहीं रहा है, मैं क्या करूँ बताइए मुझे। तो बोला अरे वो तो दिल्ली चला गया। आप यकीन नहीं करेंगे वो लास्ट डे मेरा कैसा था। मेरे पास सिर्फ 10 रुपये बचे थे, और बेंगलोर में एक अच्छी बात है कि आप 10 रुपये में पेट भर के खाना खा सकते हैं। वहाँ पे मैंने 10 रुपये का खाना खाया, और मैंने सोचा कि मुझे कुछ काम ढूंढना चाहिए। मैंने कई काम ढूंढने की कोशिश की, बट कुछ आईडी प्रूफ नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, आपको काम नहीं मिलेगा। फिर उसके बाद मैं एक वॉचमैन को देखा, उसको बोला कि मुझे कुछ काम चाहिए, आप मुझे हेल्प करो। वो भी एक बिहार का ही था, और उन्होंने बोला कि एक 10 मिनट रुको, मैं किसी को बुलाता हूँ। उन्होंने अपने बॉस के बेटे को बुलाया, और उसी दिन दूसरे दिन रमजान की चांद रात थी। उस दिन मुझे काम पे लगा हूँ, दूसरी दिन ईद है, और एज अ मुसलमान ईद की नमाज कितनी जरूरी होती है आप जानते होंगे। पहली ड्यूटी मेरी, और मेरे लोग आंखों के सामने से लोग नमाज पढ़ने जा रहे हैं, और मेरी इतना हिम्मत नहीं हुई कि मैं उनसे छुट्टी मांग सकूं। मेरे दिल में ये डर था कि हो सकता है वो मुझे काम से निकाल दे, और मेरे पास इतनी सलाहियत नहीं है कि मैं वापस भी बॉम्बे जा सकूं। एनीवे जितना रोना था मैंने रो लिया वहाँ पे। फिर उसके बाद मैंने देखा कि आप लोग लेडीज लोग गाड़ियाँ चला रही हैं, तो मेरे मन में भी ख्याल हुआ कि जब लेडीज गाड़ी चला सकते हैं तो हम क्यों नहीं चला सकते। तो हमने भी ड्राइविंग क्लासेस की, 1-2 साल हमने काम किया। वापस बॉम्बे आए कि हमें नहीं बॉलीवुड में जाना है। बॉलीवुड जो माइंड में था वो हमेशा चलता रहा, बॉलीवुड में जाना है। वापस मैंने बॉम्बे आया, बॉम्बे आने के बाद मैंने एक चीज भूल गया मैं। बैंगलोर में जब था, मैं जब वॉचमैन की ड्यूटी कर रहा था, तभी वहाँ पे एक अंकल रेंट पे रहा करते थे। उन्होंने मुझे एक दिन शाम को बोला कि बेटा एक काम कर, शाम को तैयार रहना, हम लोग कहीं चलते हैं। बोला बताइए ना कहाँ जाना है, बताइए तो सही। नहीं बताया। शाम को 5 बजे वो आए घर पे, तैयार हुआ, उनके साथ गया। पहली बार इतना बड़ा ऑडिटोरियम और उसमें सालसा वर्कशॉप चल रहा है, सेम टू सेम स्टेज पे सिखाया जा रहा है और मैं नीचे डांस कर रहा हूँ। और पहली बार एक बिहार का लड़का एक इतनी सारी खूबसूरत लड़की को देख करके उसको एक डांस करने का मन हुआ कि यार डांस करनी चाहिए मुझे भी। गया क्लास में ज्वाइन किया और ज्वाइन करने के बाद जब मैं एक लड़की के साथ डांस कर रहा था तो उन्होंने, टीचर ने पलट के देखते हैं कि कौन कैसा कर रहा है, कैसा है, क्या है, नहीं है। तो उन्होंने देखा कुछ अच्छा कर रहा है, तो उन्होंने बोला कि एक लड़की के साथ नहीं, अब 2 लड़की के साथ करो। और एक ऑलरेडी है और एक मिल गया, तो एक बोलते ना कि एक एक्साइटमेंट बढ़ जाती है। तो मैंने वो किया। फिर वो करने के बाद फिर फाइनली कुछ हुआ नहीं वहाँ पे बैंगलोर में। तो मैं बोला चलो एक्चुअली बॉम्बे जाते हैं। वापस बॉम्बे आया। बॉम्बे आने के बाद मैंने न्यूज़पेपर लिया, ढूंढा कहाँ पे डांस क्लासेस होते हैं वगैरह वगैरह। मैं जुहू में आया। जुहू तारा रोड पे एक जगह पे बॉलीवुड डांस सिखाया जाता है, वहाँ पे गया। उन्होंने बोला आपको इतना पैसा देना पड़ेगा वगैरह वगैरह। मैंने बोला देखिए मेरे पास पैसे तो है नहीं है, लेकिन मुझे सीखना है। उन्होंने बोला नहीं आपको पैसा देना पड़ेगा। एनीवे वो कुछ हुआ नहीं। दूसरा नाम था नीचे संदीप सुपारकर का, उनके पास उसी दिन मैं गया। मैं एक दिन की छुट्टी ली थी मैंने काम से, जब बॉम्बे में काम कर रहा था। वो छुट्टी में मैं जब गया, उनसे मिला, उनको सारी बातें बताई कि मैंने एक छोटा सा वर्कशॉप किया था और वहाँ पर मुझे मजा आया डांस करके, मुझे करना है। आप यकीन नहीं करेंगे, बिना सोचे समझे उन्होंने बोला कि आप क्लास में आ सकते हो। और मैं जब रिटर्न घर पे गया, अंदर से इतनी खुशी थी, मैं कुछ किसी को नहीं बोला। मैं जहाँ पे काम कर रहा था, मैं बॉस को बोला कि मैं इंग्लिश सीखने जा रहा हूँ। मैंने ये नहीं बोला कि डांस सीखने जा रहा हूँ। मुझे पता था कि अगर मैं उसको बोलूँ डांस सीखने जा रहा हूँ, मुझे काम से निकाल देगा। और बैंगलोर ईस्ट में क्लास था और मैं रहता था धारावी में। धारावी से मैं चल करके डांस क्लास जाता था। और पहली बार जब मैं क्लास में गया हूँ, कोई हिंदी नहीं बोलता और मुझे ABCD का कुछ वर्ड ही नहीं पता था। बट एनीवे अभी थोड़ा बहुत पता है, लोग फॉरनर से भी आते हैं आजकल। तो जब मैं क्लास में पहली बार गया, डांस किया, क्लासेस हो गए। फिर क्लास करते करते कुछ दिन पहले मैंने एक शो आ रहा था, तो मैंने संदीप सर को पूछा सर ये जूते बहुत अच्छे कहाँ से लाए आपने? तो मैं बोला कि मैंने लंदन से मंगाया है। तो मैंने बोला सर ये सब जूते तो मैं बना सकता हूँ। बोला अच्छा मैं बना सकते हो, तुम लेकर के जाओ, बनाने की कोशिश करो। मैं धारावी में लेके गया एक जूते को, मैंने उसका पोस्टमार्टम किया पूरा खोल के सब, और मैंने 1-2 जूते बनाए। सर ने मुझे मेरे सर पे जूते भी मारे क्योंकि इतना खराब जूता बनाया तुमने। ऐसे ही बनाते बनाते कुछ जूते बनाए हमने। फाइनली एक हॉलीडे मूवी के लिए जूते बनाना था, तब मेरा शूज थोड़ा बेटर हो गया था। तो सर ने बोला कि अब तुम इसको बेच सकते हो लोगों को। फिर मैंने लोगों को बेचना चालू किया, पैसे सेविंग किए मैंने। उस टाइम पे ही मैंने दूसरे वर्कशॉप जो होते थे दूसरे कारखाने से मैं बना के लेता था। तो क्या होता है कि मैं भी कुछ डांस करते करते खुद को पता चल गया कि डांसिंग शूज होने कैसे चाहिए। और सर ने बोला कि इंडिया में कोई डांस के शूज नहीं बनाता है, अगर तुम कर सकते हो तो तुम्हारे लिए अच्छा हो जाएगा। तो मैंने कई शूज बनाने की कोशिश की और कई लोगों को मैंने जूते ऐसे ही बना बना के दिए। फिर उसके बाद मैंने थैंक यू, अगर कोई ICICI बैंक में होगा, उन्होंने मुझे लोन के लिए फोन किया। आप यकीन नहीं करेंगे, दूसरे दिन मेरे अकाउंट में पैसे आ गए, पता नहीं क्यों, वो भी मैं दायरे में रहता हूँ। आ गए। मैंने सोचा कि चलो इससे मैं खुद का वर्कशॉप डालता हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे जो चीजें चाहिए वो मैं खुद से बना सकता हूँ, क्योंकि मैं लोगों को बताना और खुद से करके लेना वो एक फर्क हो जाता है। तो मैंने खुद का एक वर्कशॉप डाला, वहां पे मैंने शूज बनाने स्टार्ट किए और धीरे धीरे एक दिन सर ने मुझे बोला कि जमील एक काम करो, मेरे घर पे आना। मैंने उसके लिए कुछ शूज बनाए स्पेशल। पहला शूज जो बनता है सबसे पहले मैं संदीप सर के लिए बनाता हूँ, क्योंकि वो डांस में कई सालों से कर रहे हैं, तो उनका जो तजुर्बा होता है वो डिफरेंट होता है। मैं उनके लिए बनाने बोला कि आप एक काम करो, कुछ सैंपल भी ले आना और जो मेरे शूज है वो लेके आना। मैं घर में इंटर किया हूँ और काजोल जी, फारा जी, अमीषा पटेल, ये सब लोग, सोनाली बेंद्री, उनके घर में बैठी है। मैंने बॉलीवुड मेरे ऑलरेडी चल के आ गए। तो फिर उन्होंने सर ने बताया कि अब ये मैं तो जानता हूँ कि काजल है, बट जमील ये काजल है, इनके लिए शूज बनाने हैं। हाँ सर ठीक है, हाँ सर ठीक है। ऐसे करके मैंने उनके लिए बनाया। और आजकल ऐसे है कि एक स्टोरी बता दो छोटा सा। इंटरनेट पे मैंने फेसबुक पे बात किया था करीना जी से। मुझे अभी भी यकीन नहीं है, लेकिन मुझे उन्होंने बोला कि जमील एक काम करो, आपके नंबर दे दो मुझे, आपको उस दिन यकीन होगा जिस दिन लोग आपको फोन करेंगे। और जब 30 मार खान मूवी आ रही थी, उसमें शीला की जवानी में उन्होंने मेरे शूज पहने और एक डिजाइनर मुझे फोन कर दिया और बोलती है कि मुझे कटरीना जी ने नंबर दिया आपका और आपके लिए शूज बनाने हैं। हाँ दिया होगा, कोई कटरीना ने दिया होगा। बट आज जो फोन आते हैं आज के जमाने में कि कटरीना जी ने बोली है कि जो भी मेरे डांस के शूज बनेंगे वो जमील ही बनाएगा और कोई नहीं बना सकता। तो ये अब मुझे थोड़ा थोड़ा यकीन होता है कि 100% वो वही थी। तो ऐसे करके फिर बीच में काली मिनोग जी यहाँ पर आई थी और वहाँ पर जब मैं गया हूँ काफी लोग वहाँ पर थे। ऐसे काली मिनोग जी थी वहाँ पर, काफी लोग थे, उसके बॉडीगार्ड वगैरह। शूज लेके गया हूँ, पाराखंड जी ने फोन की थी मुझे। और जब मैं वहां पर गया हूँ मुझे रोक दिया गया, आप अंदर नहीं जा सकते। जब मैं उन्होंने किसी डिजाइनर ने बोला कि आप बैग दे दो शूज के, मैं लेके जाता हूँ अंदर। वो गई है अंदर और काइली मिनोग जी खुद बाहर आई है, बोलिए जूते बनाने वाला कौन है, उनको बुलाओ और मैं वैसे जूते बनवाती हूँ। तो ऐसे कई स्टार्स हैं जो एक जूते चाहिए बट उनको 3 जूते बनाने पड़ते हैं, क्योंकि वो 2 जूते मैं घर लेके जाऊं ताकि मैं शो में यूज कर सकूं। तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मैंने जो मेहनत की थी और जो मैंने सोच के रखा हुआ था उस टाइम से, बॉलीवुड में जाना है, बॉलीवुड में जाना है। अभी फिलहाल धूम 3 आई थी जिसमें टैप शूज पहने थे आमिर जी ने। मैं इतने सेलिब्रिटी से मिला हूँ, लेकिन आमिर खान से मिलकर मुझे इतना खुशी हुआ कि कोई एक्टर या इतने बड़े स्टार्स लोगों से सजेशन नहीं लेते हैं, बट आमिर खान ने मुझे बोला कि जमील आप मुझे बताओ आपको क्या बेटर लगेगा। तो मैंने बोला सर ऐसे ऐसे ये सारी चीजें हैं, आप इसको ऐसे कर सकते हैं। और फिर मैंने मेरा कंपनी को लॉन्च किया कि मेरा एक छोटा सा कंपनी है शाह शूज करके। और एक जमाना था जो लोग फॉरेन जाते थे तो उनको बोलते थे कि मेरे लिए डांसिंग शूज लेके आना, और अभी ऐसा हो गया कि जो फॉरेन से लोग आते हैं उनके लिए बोलते हैं कि जमीन से शूज लेके आना। और आजकल जो किताबों में जो छपती है मेरे बारे में, और लोग जब धारावी टूर करने के लिए आते हैं फॉरेन से, हमारे वर्कशॉप में जरूर विजिट करते हैं। तो थैंक यू। और इसी को जिंदगी कहते हैं, पाना हो, मेहनत और ईमानदारी लगाए रखो, कामयाबी जरूर मिलती है। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, Mr. Jamil Shah, for telling us the importance of entrepreneurship. Now, there's no better way to end an already brilliant day than with a musical performance. That being said, I now invite the stage Mr. Naman Mehra, our very own IBDB student, to play for us his original composition, Winter Flame. With that, we come to the end of today's event, and it is my honor to deliver the vote of thanks. Firstly, I would like to thank our speakers, without whom today's event would not have been possible, and without whom we would not be walking out of these doors wiser than when we walked in. I would also like to thank Ms. Sudeshna and her team for attending this event and assisting with its planning. To Ms. Jasmine Madani, Dr. Lakshmi Murthy, and Ms. Moshmi Basu for their constant support, and without whom this event would not have been possible. And also I would like to thank Ms. Sejal for ensuring that our focus does not waver from the success of this event. I would also like to thank the more than able organizing committee of this event, and of course the support staff, without whom logistics would have been a lot harder to handle. And of course, last but not least, a big thanks to our audience, who has paid unwavering attention to the speakers on stage. And until next year, where we wish many of you are on the stage itself, thank you and goodbye.